My name is Ridima. I'm an anchor, facilitator, and a communication specialist. And I welcome you all to our show called Creativity Rules, where we bring to you stories, anecdotes, instances, and narratives, which looks to demystify and decipher creativity, how you can discover it, harness it, and tackle the stumbling blocks which come in the way of expression of creativity. In today's episode, we will be exposed to the story behind the invention of xerography, the rejections that our protagonist of story had to endure before finding the conduit for his ideas, and how at times our comfort zone can make us oblivious to immense possibilities. Our protagonist is Chester Carlson, who invented xerography in 1938, which is widely used today. But do you know that virtually every major corporation, including IBM and Kodak, scoffed at his idea and turned him down? Between 1938 to 1944, his idea was turned down by more than 20 companies. Their reason? Pretty simple, and also an outcome of their comfort zone. Their argument was that since carbon paper was cheap and plentiful, no one in their right mind would buy an expensive copier. Finally, in 1944, Bethel Memorial Institute, a non-profit research organization, became interested, signed a royalty sharing contract with Carlson, and began to develop the process. But he hit a jackpot in 1948 when his idea was picked up by Haloid, later renamed as Xerox, giving Haloid the right to develop a xerographic machine. But as we know, the rest is history with the advent of xerography. So here is the story of this invention. Carlson was an American physicist, inventor, a patent attorney born in Seattle, Washington. At the height of Great Depression, Carlson worked with patent department of P.R. Mallory and Company. While he worked at his job, he observed that there never seemed to be enough carbon copies of patent specifications, and there was no quick way of getting more. The choices were limited to sending for expensive photocopies or having the documents retyped and then reread for errors. Then a thought occurred to him. Offices might benefit from a device that would accept a document and make copies of it in seconds. For many months, Carlson spent his evenings at the New York Public Library reading all he could about imaging processes. He decided immediately not to research in the area of conventional photography, where light is an agent for chemical change, because that phenomenon was already being exhaustively explored in research labs of large corporations. Obeying the inventor's instinct that he had, and to travel the uncharted course, Carlson turned to little-known field of photoconductivity, specifically the findings of a Hungarian physicist by the name Paul Celan, who was experimenting with electrostatic images. He learned that when light strikes a photoconductive material, the electric conductivity of that material is increased. According to Carlson, things don't come to mind readily all of a sudden, like pulling things out of thin air. You have to get your inspiration from somewhere, and usually you get it from reading something else. Soon, though, he began some rudimentary experiments, beginning first to his wife's aggravation in the kitchen of his apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens. It was here that Carlson unearthed the fundamental principles of what he called electrophotography, later to be named as xerography, and defined them in a patent application filed in October of 1937. I knew, he said, that I had a very big idea by the tail, but would I tame it? So he set out to reduce his theory to practice. Frustrated by a lack of time and suffering from painful attacks of arthritis, Carlson decided to dip into his meager resources to pursue his research. He set up a small lab in nearby Astoria and hired an unemployed young physicist, a German refugee named Otto Kornoy, to help him with his lab work. It was here in a rented second floor room above a bar where xerography was invented. This is Carlson's account of that moment. I went to the lab that day and Otto had a freshly prepared sulfur coating on a zinc plate. We tried to see what we could do towards making a visible image. Otto took a glass microscopic slide and printed on it in India ink the notation 102238 Astoria. We pulled down the shade to make the room as dark as possible. Then he rubbed the sulfur surface vigorously with a handkerchief to apply an electrostatic charge and laid the slide on the surface and placed the combination under a bright incandescent lamp for a few seconds. The slide was then removed and lycopodium powder was sprinkled on the sulfur surface. By gently blowing on the surface, all the loose powder was removed and there was left on the surface a near perfect duplicate in powder of notation which had been printed on the glass slide. Both of us repeated the experiment several times to convince ourselves that it was true. Then we made some permanent copies by transferring the story of xerography, pages 6 of 13 powder images, to wax paper and heating the sheets to melt the wax. Afraid that others might be also thinking on the same lines and follow the trail and copy his work, Carlson carefully patented his ideas as he learned more about this new technology. But his fear was totally unfounded. Carlson was quite alone in his work and in his belief that xerography was of practical value to anyone. He pounded the pavement for years in a fruitless search for a company that would actually develop his invention into a useful product. From 1939 to 1944, he was turned down by more than 20 companies. Even the National Invention Council dismissed his work. According to him, some people were indifferent, some expressed mild interest, and one or two were even antagonistic. How difficult it was to convince anyone that my tiny plates and rough image held the key to a tremendous new industry. It seems it was indeed tough. He said that years went by without a serious nibble to the extent of convincing him that he should drop the idea, but somehow he convinced himself that the invention was too promising to remain dormant. Finally, in 1944, Battelle Memorial Institute, a non-profit research organization, became interested and signed a royalty-sharing contract with Carlson and began to develop the process. And in 1947, Battelle entered into an agreement with a small photopaper company called Haloid, later to be known as Xerox, giving Haloid the right to develop a xerographic machine. It was not until 1959, 21 years after Carlson invented xerography, that the first convenient office copier using xerography was unveiled. The 914 copier could make copies quickly at the touch of a button on a plain paper. It was a phenomenal success. Today, xerography is the foundation stone of a gigantic worldwide copying industry, including Xerox and other corporations, which make and market copiers and duplicators, producing billions and billions of copies a year. So the bottom line is really this: that had Carlson given up back in 1938 after undergoing more than 20 back-to-back rejections, we would have not been able to really get exposed to xerography and we would have still been stuck on carbon paper. Think about it. Had he not persevered through the rejections, we would have been oblivious to the beauty of xerography. Had he not kept his intent intact, the premise of making a photocopy would still have been archaic, which leaves us with the insight that if your idea is ahead of its time, you will need to find that small critical mass of audience who can take a bet on your idea rather than going all over the place. Niche ideas need niche audience. If people are rejecting your ideas consistently, there really are two possibilities. Either your idea is really lousy and you need to make it better, or it is supremely legendary idea, in which case you need to enhance the clarity to communicate it to people in a way that they understand it. If you liked our video and found it meaningful, please do comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and do share it in your circle. Till then, be engrossed in creativity rules. This is Ridima Wali signing off.